Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this SLT webinar. I'm just going to start us off. My name is Nick Sanderman from AQA. I'm account manager in the Northeast. So I am going to be shortly handing over to our two hosts for the session. Before I do that, I've just got a couple of housekeeping messages to go through with you all. So we are recording this session, and we're recording it for two reasons. First of all, we have an obligation to our regulators to make sure that we are saying the right things and that they can hear what we're saying and they can check we're making sure that we are being accurate with everything that we share with schools and colleges across the country. But also, and really importantly, we want to make sure that colleagues across the country are able to access this recording after the event if they weren't able to join live. So we are sharing the recording on YouTube, and that'll be available from our SLT Insights website and from any link that we share after the meeting. It's not searchable in YouTube. It won't come up in YouTube searches. You do have to access it from that link. We're going to be opening the floor to questions and answering questions later on in the session. If you've got a question, if you can please use the Q&A function that you should find at the top of your screen if you're accessing this from the Teams app. If you've got a web version of the app, the Q&A may or may not be available. It depends on the version of the browser that you're using. If you've got it, that's brilliant. Please use it, ask the questions, and we will look at those questions, and where we can answer them during the session, we will do. When we can answer them at the end of the session, we've got a section at the end, 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the session to answer questions. Any that we don't get to because we either run out of time or we want to take a considered thought about the answer before we respond, we'll keep those questions back and we'll make sure we answer them after the event and provide a Q&A document afterwards. If you aren't able to use the Q&A function, then at the end of the slide deck, there is a link to the account manager's web page for AQA. If you can email your local account manager with a question for this session, we can then forward that on your behalf to either Chris or Julian and get a response for you. We'll send that response out directly to you, but we'll also collate those and put those into the FAQs as well. So you should be able to ask your questions either live during the session or afterwards using your account manager local to you. Without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Julian to start us off.
Thank you, Nick, and good afternoon, colleagues. So I'm Julian Clarke, Head of Curriculum Development at AQA, and with me is Chris Tubbrit, who is the Head of Product Development at TQ UK, and he'll introduce himself in a little while when we get to that section. I'll show on the screen the sort of agenda for the next sort of 55 minutes or so. I want to do a brief introduction and overview to the AQA group and what that looks like, and then we'll move into first of all, the Advanced British Standard and what's potentially coming down the line, a few things there. A very quick update on A-levels in 2025 and what we're doing within AQA. And then I'll hand over to Chris to take you through the technical and vocational landscape and what that's looking like, reform timelines and so on. And then we'll come back together for a question and answer session. And as Nick said, if you're able to post your questions in the Q&A box, then we'll try and answer them, or if they're relevant and they fit in at the point, we'll try and answer them as we go along, or we'll take them when we get to that Q&A point. Okay, so a quick word about the AQA group. Potentially wider than many people may be aware. All the organisations on screen are part of the AQA group. We work very collaboratively and collectively together, as shown this afternoon by Chris and I doing this double act. You'll be familiar with a couple of the products from Double Struck, in particularly ExamPro and TestSpace. And also you'll probably have heard of Project Q, the management tool that we're integrating into the supply of and delivery of our project qualifications. So more on TQ UK later. I just wanted to flag just how large and collaborative the AQA group is at this point. So moving on, what I've pulled together are some quotes and extracts from the document, A World-Class Education System, the Advanced British Standard, published by the DFE in October. And I'm going to take you through a few of these, a few extracts from that document. It's worth saying at this point that we're around the table in terms of discussions as to what this might look like in the future, and it is a long-term development. So the published sort of timeline from the DFE is a 10-year one, a decade one of change, and obviously that means everything is at the very, very early stages of development at the moment. So it would be really useful for us, and we're really keen to engage in your views on what this looks like, what the implications are, what your perspective is on the outline plans as they exist at the moment. So as a follow-up to this session, I'll be circulating a survey of questions. And if you don't mind responding to those to give us some information on your views and your perceptions, then we can build that in and feed that into what we actually say in those discussions with the department and other organisations. The summary statements there, extracts are taken from the speech of Julian Keegan, Secretary of State for Education, when the intent to introduce the Advanced British Standard was announced. And some of you will remember, as I do, that the sort of view of trying to bring together the technical and academic landscape, educational landscape, has been a political desire and will for many, many decades. We can trace it right back to the introduction of GCSEs, indeed, in 1987, when there was a desire to equate the different routes that different students were following at that particular point in time. But of course, that was at age 16. Now we're talking at about age 18. So a few very sort of, I suppose, stark messages in there. I think one of the ones which has the potential biggest impact that we need to consider is actually around the increase in teaching time for students in the classroom and the implications for that. And linked to that, the size and number of qualifications and subjects that students might actually follow, but more on that in a moment. So the intent is that it's a baccalaureate style program, really. In other words, it's the end of a course of study. It recognises what students have been able to achieve across that broad course of study, and it's made up of a range of different component parts. And of course, there are lots of different models of baccalaureate style programs around the country. The one that the DFE has quoted and which I've extracted here is the situation in Ireland. And you can see the range of components that relate to that final certificate that students attain at the end of their course when they've completed the programme of study. So what will it mean? So these are sort of, I suppose, the really sort of blunt statements, really, but an increase in teaching hours. At the moment, I think the research says that students in the UK receive about 15 hours fewer teaching hours than students in other countries, and there's a desire to increase what that looks like. An increase in the range of subjects that students study. So instead of taking typically 3 A levels, they would take an increased number of subjects. And there's a big question there for consideration as to how that fits into the working week and what that looks like. The need to study maths and English to 18 for all students at different levels. And most importantly, that link across that I mentioned a minute ago, being able to follow academic, technical or mixed pathways, but with equal prestige and equal value given to them. So the intent from all of that is that at 16, students have a simpler choice rather than a range of different pathways and subjects and so on combinations that they can follow. So as I said a moment ago, all students would follow and study English and maths, at least to minor level. I'll come back to minors, majors and double majors in a minute. They would have a broad choice of academic and technical subjects that they could choose from, and they would be of different sizes and take up different amounts of teaching time within the timetable. But in addition to that, they would also have time built in for non-qualification activities such as enrichment and so on. One of the aspects that's not mentioned directly anywhere is project qualifications, and in the survey that will follow, I'd be very interested on your view as to where project qualification should or shouldn't fit into this particular picture. So this slide just summarises the DfE's view of what we have at the moment and what it will become like when the Advanced British Standard is in place in a decade, assuming everything goes to plan. I won't read through that in any detail. Okay, I think I will pull out the equal choice between technical and academic subjects under the same qualification umbrella as being that overarching equivalence which is being strived to be achieved. So what might the routes actually look like? And the important thing here is that the route is designed, or is the range of routes is designed to be applicable to individual students wanting to follow particular pathways into particular careers or with particular interests or particular strengths. And obviously one of the aspects that will impact here is capacity to provide the range of subjects and pathways that students may want to follow and what that looks like. So in terms of the particular categories of study, you'll see on the right hand side I've put out double majors, majors, minors, industry placements. The size of those is quite important. So the double major is supposedly, the initial thought will be double the size of a major. A major is probably slightly less in size than an existing A-level, and a minor is somewhat smaller than that. Now, what those components look like at the moment and the nature of them is still very much up for discussion. You know, where, for example, might AS levels sit, where might AAQs sit, which I know Chris will come on to in a little while, how much time might each of these take. But the outcome of all of those opportunities is that typically a student would follow a minimum or study a minimum of 5 subjects, and that would provide them with their route through. What we also don't know is, for example, will students have to make the decision as to what their majors are at the start of the sixth form course, in other words, at age 16 as they start, or will they be able to start with a range of minors and then select their majors as they go forward? So there's a lot of questions as to what this actually looks like in practice and how it pans out. And as I said, I'm keen to gather your thoughts as to what that should look like. There will be a dedicated route for those working below level 3, in other words, A-level equivalent, and it will be possible for students to go straight into apprenticeships if they're wishing to work and have on-the-job training rather than a purely academic route or a mixed route. Okay, so that gives you a very brief overview of the Advanced British Standard. As I said, I will forward a survey probably beginning of next week with a small number of questions just asking for your views and your opinions and your fears and thoughts and opportunities that you might see from that idea. The other piece I wanted to just pick up on is A-level provision in 2025, and we've just been sharing there about the Advanced British Standard, and the intention for that is for that to be introduced in 10 years' time. That's a significant period of time from now, although the development will take that period of time. In the meantime, we have a range of changes coming in and a range of different courses being introduced. On the A-level front, there are no plans to reform the existing suite of A-level specifications nationally. So there were no plans to do what you'll remember from last reform, when there was a widespread phased development of new specifications. That said, we will, as we always do, continue to work with yourselves to inform what updates might be needed, and that includes where there might be a need for a particular broad reform process, or indeed to make our own amendments to the existing specifications if those would be beneficial. And a specific case that you will probably have heard about is our reform of the AS and A-level business studies, which we're just beginning to process forward now. So an A-level, an email about that should have come into centres, I think last week now. But if you've got any queries about that, I can happily update later. Alongside that, of course, the full list of available AS and A levels is available on the website. So in terms of specification, that's where we're up to. And then finally, I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that we're continuing to update and enhance the resources that are available to support all the specifications. And that's as part of the ongoing customer support offer. That will continue large scale for the next 12 months because we need to make sure everything's up to date. And then there will be an annual review process, which means that those resources are maintained and are as up to date as they can possibly be as things develop and move forward. So in the next 12 months, where those resources haven't been updated and refreshed for AS and A level specifications, you'll see that coming through. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to hand over to Chris, and he'll introduce himself. Chris, over to you.
Lovely. Thanks, Julian, and good afternoon, everybody. As an introduction, I'm Chris Tubbrit. I'm the Head of Product Development at Training Qualifications UK, otherwise known as TQ UK. So I do have a slide that would look to run through in terms of a bit of an introduction to TQ UK. So in terms of TQ UK, we are an awarding organisation. We were founded in 2013, where we began as an awarding organisation and were later approved to deliver endpoint assessments in 2017. We currently have over 1,000 approved centres globally and also have an international hub in Hong Kong. We have a large range of partner relationships, whether that be a learning resource provider or training providers, where we've developed meaningful and bespoke qualifications. We currently have over 300 qualifications and 30 plus apprenticeship standards where we do actually offer the endpoint assessments. We are in the top 10 awarding bodies in the UK. Bear in mind there are 130 plus awarding organisations currently. And this is largely down to our first class service and being industry leaders in our service and quality across both APA and awarding services. So a bit of an overview of TQK as an awarding organisation there. So in terms of our goal is to become the #1 in technical education. So that may seem a bold statement or an even ambitious statement, but it's what we're all about here at TQK. We're about being ambitious with our direction of travel and being at the forefront of education reforms in technical education. However, to put that in context, reforms and defunding have presented notable changes and challenges, particularly around defunding elements, but it has also provided opportunities to develop new technical and academic products over the coming years. It's these opportunities where TQK intend to be at the forefront of reform qualifications by being the best we can to deliver the best to our customers. So it might take us 3 years, it might take us 10, however long the road, we have a clear destination where we're heading towards and can now move on in that direction with confidence and efficiency. So just a brief overview of us as TQK and what our overarching goal is.
Chris, can I just interrupt for a second? We've just got some chat coming in. The text slides looks to be a bit dodgy on the slide, so I'm going to suggest we close this down and I'll open a different version of the slide deck and see if that fixes the problem. Is that okay?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. Okay, so as an introduction then, the next few years we'll witness some dramatic changes across post-16 qualification landscape. So following significant consultation with the entire industry, the Department for Education has introduced new reforms that will make a major impact on centres, learners and employers alike. So the Department for Education have spent the last few years casting its eagle eye over the post-16 qualification landscape, collaborating with stakeholders across the length and breadth of the education landscape. And they found that the current way of working was causing confusion for learners who are struggling to understand how the options available help them advance, and also for employers who are finding qualified recruits difficult to come by. So as a result, a new qualification and a new system has been introduced with a focus on increasing the value of learning and strengthening pathways into careers. So this process is already underway and is split into 3 distinct phases. So phase 1 is the removal of funding from low and no enrollments. This phase has already taken place and is completed. Phase 2 is the removal of funding from qualifications that overlap with T-levels, where we've already seen removal of funding for 16 to 19 starts for Wave 1 and 2 T-levels. And most recently, we've seen the announcement of the removal of funding for qualifications that overlap with Wave 3 T-levels for new starts from the 1st of August 2024. Wave 4 is yet to be announced. Phase 3, however, is possibly the biggest and most significant changes, where they are looking to start to defunding all qualifications that have not been through the new technical approval and evaluation process to be improved in one of the new qualification categories under the technical or academic qualification groups. So we'll talk more about that, those new groups, and what those qualifications look like later in this webinar. But we can expect to see some significant reforms to the education landscape for level 3 and below qualifications, which will start to be defunded from August 2025 onwards, as we see the introduction of the newly reformed qualifications entering the market from September 2025 onwards. Okay, Nick, if we move to the next slide, please. Okay, to help dig a little bit deeper into reforms and defunding, following on from the last slide, we want to provide a bit more of an overview of this on this slide. So in light of the review conducted by the DFE on qualifications for students aged 60 and above, the DFE have confirmed its objective to establish a streamlined qualification system. So they deemed the qualifications market for post-16 learners was too complex, it was too difficult to navigate for learners, and there was too many qualifications to pick from for making learners' choices more difficult. They also stated that not all post-16 options were aligned to the jobs market, skills needs and demands, and therefore DFE has confirmed its objectives to establish a more streamlined qualification system. So the intention of reforms and defunding is to provide a clearer post-16 qualification system that is simpler to navigate. So in short, a post-16 learner, when they leave school, if they progress to a level 3 option, for example, they will be able to choose from academic and technical options. So their options would be, for example, an apprenticeship, a T-level, an A-level, or the newly reformed academic and technical qualifications, which will go live from September 2025 onwards. So with regards to reform, this is where they've proposed a new set of qualifications that provide quality and rigour, but are aligned to the jobs needs, skills demand, but also don't overlap with existing A-levels and T-levels and apprenticeship provision. So this is where reforms and defunding come into play. Defunding as well will be removing funding from all qualifications they deem not to align to the new reforms, or where they've not been through the new technical evaluation process for approval. So the diagram on the slide shows us the phase of defunding and reduction of those cycles, and when new level 3 academic and technical qualifications will be available from for first teaching. So as we mentioned on the previous slide, phase 1 has already been completed in terms of removal of funding from low and no enrollments. Phase 2 from August 2024 is where we'll see the removal of funding from qualifications that overlap with Wave 3 T-levels, noting that Wave 4 overlap announcements have not been confirmed yet. But if we look at the phases 2 to 5, if we look at phases particularly 3 under phases 2 and 3 there, what you can see is in August 2025, funding will be removed from level 3 qualifications aligned to SSA subjects in cycle 1 for technical and academic qualifications. And that's to pave way for the third point you can see on the diagram is for the new AAQs and technicals to be approved from cycle 1 to be funded for first teaching from September 2025. So that's cycle 1. In the August, we'll see defunding 2025 to make way for the newly approved qualifications approved from funding from September 2025. That's cycle 1. Cycle 2 is the similar approach, but it occurs the following year. So again, in August 2026, we'll see funding removed from all level 3 qualifications aligned to subjects in cycle 2 for technical and academic qualifications, and that will pave way for the newly approved qualifications in cycle 2 in academic and AAQs and technicals approved for first teaching from September 2026. Okay, if we can move to the next slide, please, Nick. So a very brief overview in terms of what are academic and technical qualifications. So the two new qualification types are designed to cater for more specific routes, one being academic route and the other being technical route. Academic routes are more scholarly and academic in nature and support progression to further and higher education. So if a learner wants to head to university, this may be the best option for them. However, on the other side, the technical routes are designed to develop technical skills, and some also may have an element of work experience to them. Typically, technical qualifications will be mapped to apprenticeship standards and are typically for learners who want to get into the workplace sooner rather than later may be best taken this option. Okay, Nick, if we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so what does the future reformed landscape look like for level 3 and below? The table on this slide illustrates the options available to learners in the future reformed level 3 and below landscape. So if we look at level 3, which is shaded in yellow on this slide, on the academic side, we have A-levels and also alternative academic qualifications known as AAQs and other academic qualifications, all of which are designed to support progression to further or higher education. On the technical side of it, we have apprenticeships, we have T-levels, and we have the new groups called technical occupational qualifications, which support progression to skilled employment or to higher level technical studies, such as technical groups called occupational entry, additional specialists, cross-cutting functional skills, for example. Also, we do note that learners studying T-levels, which have UCAS points, can also progress to higher academic study. If we look at the level 2 options available, shaded in a light blue on the slide, if we look at the academic side, you have what is called academic progression qualifications, and these are designed to support progression to academic study at level 3. Qualifications at this level and in this group will only be available in subjects approved for delivery at level 3 is an AAQ. On the technical side of it, you have a similar qualification group called technical progression qualifications. And again, in a similar nature, these are designed to support progression to technical qualifications at level 3, not delivered as part of the T-level program. So that would be progression to level 3 technical qualification groups such as occupational entry, additional specialists, etc., or indeed they could progress to an apprenticeship, for example. Additionally, on the technical side at level 2, you also have the newly proposed T-level foundation qualifications, which these qualifications will support progression to the T-levels. And then finally at the bottom, what we have is the level 1 in the dark blue and entry level in the grey. And at level 1 and entry level, we have a new qualification group title following on from level 2 called progression qualifications. And this is designed to support progression from level 1 to either academic or technical study, and from entry level onto level 1 progression qualifications. Further guidance on the details of what these look like are expected to be in the future consultations and technical outcomes in future cycles. Hopefully that's helpful though as a high-level overview of the reform proposals and an introduction to what the new education landscape looks like at level 3 and below. In addition to this, it's also worth mentioning that other reforms are expected for ESOL, Skills for Life, English and Maths qualifications, not GCSE or functional skills though, so we're talking more about those bite-sized or standalone English and Maths qualifications, and then also personal social employability qualifications, otherwise known as PSE. So we'll talk more about these reforms in the next few slides, but first I want to take a deep dive into the reforms specifically at level 3 on the next slide. So if we can move to the next slide, please, Nick. Okay, so we've already seen reforms to level 3 qualifications in the form of apprenticeships in terms of the removal of frameworks, and the most recent addition of reforms and policy changes around mandated qualifications and apprenticeships, and the shift towards an integrated assessment and the approaches taken here. In addition, we've seen the reforms to the introduction of T-levels in this space as well. Outside of this, and in addition, the new proposals at level 3 include reforms to introduce a technical route and an academic route. So on the technical route, you will have an apprenticeships, you will have T-levels, in the introduction of new technical groups. These technical groups include occupational entry for 16 to 19 and 19 plus as one group, an occupational group to 19 plus, so just adults only. It will also include groups called additional specialists, cross-cutting functional, and employer proposed. And all of these have been designed to support learners to progress to skilled employment or to a higher level technical study, and would typically have some level of mapping to existing apprenticeship standards. On the academic side, you will have A-levels that will remain, but alongside A-levels, you will also have alternative academic qualifications known as AAQ for short. AAQs are designed to be taken alongside or instead of A-levels and will be available in subjects not already available via A-levels and T-levels. For AAQs, you will have small and large AAQs. So for example, small AAQs will range from 150 guided learn hours to 420 guided learn hours and will be equivalent to an ES level or a full A level, depending on the GLH. So for example, 180 GLH AAQ will be equivalent to an ES level, and a 360 GLH AAQ is equivalent to a 1 full A level. Large AAQs will only be available in 720 GLH or 1080 GLH sizes and will be limited to sport, performing arts, and art, craft and design subjects only. 720 GLH AAQs will be equivalent to 2 A levels, and 1080 GLH AAQs will be equivalent to 3 A levels. So if you look at the options that we've got mapped out on this slide, you'll see we've listed out options 1 to 8. It's just important to note that that's not relative to any funding or reform guidance. It's merely an approach we've used to support our description and illustrations on this slide. However, with that noted, if we look at the technical route, learners will have options to progress to apprenticeships, T-levels, and the new technical routes. However, on the academic route, we've listed out a number of options which pertains to how DfE have stated in its funding manual how AAQs will be funded as part of a mixed study programme alongside A levels. So just to walk through those options, you've got option 4, which is your traditional option where a learner will study 3 A levels in a typical 2-year study programme. But then what we start to see from options 5 to 8 is where the small and large AAQs come into play in terms of what a typical mixed study programme may look like. So option 5 is where you see the introduction of a small AAQ alongside 2 A levels. Option 6 is where you see 1 A level alongside 2 small AAQs. And that is particularly for students on a part-time study programme, students with lower prior attainment at level 2, or students with special education needs and disabilities and those with exceptional circumstances. So there's some caveats around where that will be permitted. Options 7 and 8 is where you see the introduction of large AAQs. So option 7 is where you can have 1 A level and 1 large AAQ to the size of 720 GLH, which is equivalent to 2 A levels, maintaining that 3 A level equivalency. Option 8 is where you can see 1 AAQ, large AAQ being delivered to the size of 1080 GLH, which is equivalent to 3 A levels. And that will be the only permutation where that will be permitted, but that is limited to limited subject areas on that one. So it is important to note that other academic qualifications that are out of scope for defunding will remain unaffected by the reforms and will have continued delivery. This includes the IB diploma, core maths, access to HE, performing arts graded examinations and extended project qualifications. They remain out of scope and unaffected in the short term of these reforms. There are 2 important updates that we've seen in the November published guidance on level 3 and below reforms, and this is in particular reference to the mixed study programme. So this includes option 6. So previously the guidance stated that this would only be available to learners who are part-time or learners with special educational needs. However, in the November updated guidance, we've seen this updated to reflect the point you can see in red on the screen, that this will be also applicable to learners with lower prior attainment at level 2, which provides greater scope for this option to be available to more learners progressing from level 2 to level 3. In addition, in the updated guidance published in November 2023, the DfE confirmed that a study programme contained a large technical qualification combined with small AAQs or A levels could form a mixed technical programme at level 3 and may also benefit some students. And that's on the caveat of it having a minimum GLH of 450 guided learn hours. So in light of the introduction of the Advanced British Standard, this is the first introduction in the new reforms for academic and technical qualifications being studied together in a mixed study programme, and is similar to that expected of the new proposals under the Advanced British Standard. So it's one to watch to see how this evolves, as this would likely inform the direction of travel of the ABS, the Advanced British Standard. So a bit more of a deeper dive there on level 3 reforms particularly, but if we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so talking through AAQ subjects and the cycles in a bit more detail. AAQs are being developed in cycles. So the DfE has only published information on cycles 1 and 2 currently, but are expected to take a yearly approach to each cycle. The cycle defines what subjects DfE and Ofqual will be accepting submissions against, at what point they will be approved for go live. So if we look at the left-hand side of your screen at the minute, and we look at cycle 1, this was open for submissions for awarding organisations to submit against in July 2023. This will go through a review over the next year, with final subjects being approved by September 2024 for first teaching for September 2025. And that's to give centres and providers a year's notice for planning preparation for delivery. The subjects available for submission against were the ones you can see on the left-hand side that are in the black text. So that's health and social care, engineering, IT and computing, applied and medical science, and subjects in healthcare, allied to medicine, dentistry, and nursing. The subjects you can see in blue were where they would accept submissions against in these subjects, but by exception only, and that these subjects have been identified as being very close to T-level content, so they would only accept submissions against these by exception where the content does not overlap. So they are by exception only. Okay, if we look at the right-hand side of your screen now then, and we look at cycle 2, this is currently open for submission in the months leading up to the final deadline of the 21st of June 2024. Again, similar to cycle 1, it will go through a review over the year that follows, with final subjects being approved by September 2025 for first teaching for September 2026, maintaining that year notice of what's been approved to support with planning and preparation. So if we look at the subjects available there on the screen, you see the ones that are in black text on the left-hand side of cycle 2. So these subjects are available as a small AAQ, so that's equivalent to an S or an A level. Those are available in uniform protective services, policing, British Sign Language, sound engineering, animation and visual arts, music performing and technology, creative digital media, digital games and film and video production. However, in addition to that, what we see in the new updated November guidance is 3 new subjects introduced into cycle 2 for small AAQs, that being financial studies, human biology, and education in early years. In addition to that, what we can see in the orange text is where large AAQs and small AAQs will be available for submission against, and that's in performing arts, sport, art, craft, and design. Now, on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a list of blue subjects there. This is with regards to subjects where the DfE have listened to feedback and where some subjects have been excluded entirely. So, for example, travel and tourism, they've listened to the feedback and therefore the DfE sought to address this by providing further subs they would consider for small AAQs to be submitted against, but by exception only. So this includes the blue ones on the right-hand side of the screen. And this is where the DfE have identified the SSAs without A levels, where AOs or awarding organisations can therefore submit small AAQs for funding approval, but by exception only. So in summary, those subjects on the right-hand side will be considered by exception and will require additional evidence and go through additional extra scrutiny to be considered as a small AAQ. So those blue subjects on the right-hand side and those yellow subjects, which are new, as updates that we received in the November updated guidance for cycle 2. But hopefully that's a helpful overview in terms of AAQs, what subjects are available and available for first teaching in cycle 1 and cycle 2. But if we can move on to the next slide there, please. Okay, so this slide is intended to support you within an overview of what AAQs TQ UK are doing. So in cycle 1, we are developing small AAQs in engineering, health and social care, and IT. In developing small AAQs, we're developing a nested approach to that. So we're developing a certificate size equivalent to 180 GLH and a diploma size equivalent to 360 GLH. So that if somebody is studying a 2-year mixed study program, which would include 2 A levels and 1 small AAQ, it allows centres to register on the certificate size in year 1 and then top up to the diploma size in year 2 It also allows the options if somebody's enrolled onto the diploma and leaves after year one, they can drop down to the certificate and still be awarded for what they've studied. So it gives flexibility of delivery for learners and centres to protect retention, success and achievement. So we're developing a nested approach to the small AAQs. Those are going through scrutiny as we speak. We'll find out the outcome of those by September 2024, and those are for first teaching September 2025. Cycle 2, there's a lot more subjects available, as we've covered on the previous slide, that are available. So we are developing small AAQs in performing arts, sport, art, craft and design, uniform services, policing, creative digital media, film and video production, and sound engineering. In addition to that, we are also developing large AAQs in performing arts, sport, and art, craft and design. So we're currently developing these products as we speak, ready to submit in June next year. We'll find out in September 2025 if they've been approved, and that will be for first teaching from September 2026. In addition to this, we are considering applied science as a small AAQ and also considering what we can do for the 3 new subjects introduced for Cycle 2 in financial studies, human biology, and education in early years, and we will look to provide updates on this in due course. But hopefully that's helpful as an overview of what TQK are developing in the AAQ space. But if we can move to the next slide now, please, Nick. Okay, over the next 2 slides, I'm going to look to give a very short overview about the other reforms that are happening to English and Maths, ESOL, and PSE. So on this slide, we can see English and Maths qualifications on the left-hand side. In this particular, just important to point out, this is not applicable to functional skills or GCSE. So this applies to level 1 and entry level qualifications, sometimes known as bite-size or standalone qualifications. But in terms of a summary of the proposal, DfE proposed to continue funding at level 1 and entry level, including sub-levels, high quality English and Maths qualifications that deliver basic literacy and numeracy for those who cannot directly access functional skills or GCSE. They are proposing, however, to remove funding at level 2 for non-GCSE functional skills English and Maths. They are also proposing to consider the need for updating the national standards for adult literacy and numeracy as well. So to be in scope for funding for these qualifications, new products and qualifications will have to be developed to meet national standards for adult literacy and numeracy once they've been redeveloped, and also be designed to support those who cannot access functional skills in GCSE. So an example of that would be an entry level or level 1 qualification in English and Maths skills that builds on confidence and ability for learners who need to support to access functional skills or GCSE. So that's a short overview on English and Maths reforms. On the right-hand side of this slide, though, you can see English qualifications for speakers of other languages, otherwise known as ESOL. So qualifications named ESOL Skills for Life are in scope of this review. ESOL International qualifications are out of scope of the review. And in terms of the summary of the proposals, the DfE are proposing to continue to fund high-level quality ESOL Skills for Life qualifications at level 2, level 1, and entry levels 1, 2, and 3. And to be in scope for these, they need to meet the requirements of the reformed national standards for adult literacy, of which will be getting redeveloped. So an example of what would be in scope here is qualifications in reading, writing, speaking, and listening, designed to support speakers of other languages within the UK to develop their English language skills for work, further learn, and everyday life. Now, a bit of an update on this is that these reforms at English and Maths and ESOL were confirmed in November's update in their published guidance, is being delayed for first teaching until September 2028. So they were supposed to be introduced from September 2027, but they are now being delayed for reforms for first introduction till September 2028. So that's moved on another year. But if we can move to the next slide, I'll talk a bit more about PSE to finish off the reforms. So around PSE, then the DfE proposed to develop a set of national standards for PSE qualifications. So these standards, similar to the standards underpinning essential digital skills qualifications, for example, would include core content, skills, key behaviours, and set out a clear continuum of skills development and progression across the levels. The standards supported by a comprehensive framework would underpin qualification designing in future only qualifications designed to meet these requirements or standards would be in scope for funding and approval. So all other qualifications will be defunded. So the DfE intend to develop standards for the qualification that deliver personal social development, employability skills, and independent living and life skills. So the first teach date was discussed for a potential 1-year delay, similar to that to ESOL in English and Maths. However, in the November update, it was published and confirmed that first teaching would be stuck to as from September 2027 as originally planned. So hopefully that's a bit of a helpful overview of ESOL, English and Maths and PSE reforms that are also happening in the reform phases and cycles. But if we can move to the next slide, please, Nick. Okay, this slide shows the, when the newly reformed development cycles will take place, when the deadline for submission of products in that cycle are required. So that's the orange dates. Those dates are when awarding organisations developing those products are required to submit them for approval. And then the yellow dates are when those products are approved, when they will be available for first teaching. So if I walk us through each cycle and give a high-level overview of what's happening in reforms over this year and the following years. So in cycle 1, what we've seen for submission in July this year that's already gone is we've seen the submission of level 3 AAQs in those limited subject areas that I've covered in the previous few slides. We also seen the availability to submit level 3 technical qualifications, but only in occupational and additional specialist qualifications, again in restricted and limited subject areas. And what we've recently seen is the submission of level 2 occupational entry and additional specialist qualifications for a November submission in limited subject areas again. So that's cycle 1 concluded in terms of submission deadlines. What we'll see now is engagement with awarding organisations with Ofqual, DfE and the Institute or IFATE to review those products for approval by May to September next year for first teaching in September 2025. Cycle 2 is where we're currently at in terms of development. So in terms of what's available for development in cycle 2 is those level 3 alternative academic qualifications in much more subjects available in that area, but also level 3 technicals in all available subjects area. Anything developed in that area by awarding organisations has to be submitted in June 2024. Level 2 technicals are also available in subject areas that have been submitted in cycle 1. That submission has to happen in October next year. And what we can also see is level 2 academic progression qualifications again in those limited subject areas in October next year. Outside of that, we've got the T-level foundation qualifications, which is in cycle 2 to be submitted in October 2024. And all of those are for first teaching from September 2026. Outside of this, and those of you of particular interest to Key Stage 4, is we are eagerly waiting for the outcome of the next round of technical award approval process for 2027 performance tables, which will be for first teaching September 2025. An update is expected on that in the coming weeks before Christmas. So that is one to watch as to when the approval process will take place for those qualifications. Moving on to cycle 3. Cycle 3 will include level 2 and level 3 technicals, and for the technical groups known as cross-cutting functional skills. Level 2 academic progression qualifications, level 2 technical progression qualifications, and the same at level 1 and entry-level progression qualifications, as well as PSE. So that will be for developing the year after next, ready for submission in July 2025 for first teaching from September 2027. What we then see is cycle 4, where we've seen the delay to English and Maths in ESOL come into place. So that's moved from cycle 3 to cycle 4. And that's where bite-sized standalone English and Maths qualifications will need to be redeveloped to meet the new standards and submitted in July 2026 for first teaching from September 2028. And the same for ESOL Skills for Life framework. Alongside this, what you can see in the blue text there is we actually see cycle 1 submission come round again. So qualifications approved in cycle 1 will be approved on performance tables and approved for funding for 3 years. What we'll see in cycle 4 is that 3-year process coming to an end where those products need to be resubmitted to be re-approved again for another 3 years. So that's another thing to note, is that performance table qualifications will be approved for 3 years. Any qualifications you see on the screen now, when they're approved, they will be approved for 3 years for funding as well. So there's some silver lining and benefit to the reforms that will see much more longevity in terms of funding approval and performance table approval. But just a point to note, at cycle 4 is where we see cycle 1 coming back into play, and we have to resubmit anything approved in cycle 1 again. But hopefully that's helpful as a bit of a snapshot or a bit of an overview of the cycles, the different stages, and what we're working to over the next sort of 5 to 7 years in terms of the reforms. If we can move to the next slide, please, Nick. Okay. So you may be asking how you can get involved. There's various ways in which we can get involved. So one of the ways is, as a subject matter expert, you may want to get involved in the writing or reviewing of new AAQ qualifications and assessment. This is paid for work and something that can be done alongside full-time teaching assessment roles. So that's one way that we can get involved. Another way is as a provider, such as a sixth form school or an FE college, in terms of providing letters of support that demonstrates demand for these qualifications. Or if you're an HEI, as in a higher education institution, so this could be a university or an FE college with HE provision, for example, with the view to provide a letter of support that demonstrates recognition of these qualifications support progression to higher education. So if you want to be involved in any of these capacities, you can please fill out our short survey, which is shown via QR code on the screen now. Alternatively, you can email any expressions of interest to qualifications@TQK. What I will say is one of the added benefits in getting involved in any of those capacities is you're going to get line of sight of the content, the design, and the makeup of these qualifications. So you'll get a much earlier introduction to the view and structure of these qualifications ahead of them going live. But hopefully that's helpful in terms of an overview of the reforms, in particular AAQs as well. But I will look to hand back over to my colleague Julian, or take any further questions at this juncture.
Thanks, Chris. That's great. And we have got a couple of questions come in. One is around whether there'll be a repeat of the webinar. The answer to that is no, but we will be sending out a link to the recording of the webinar, so you will be able to listen again or discuss it with colleagues and so on. Another one, Chris, for you really, around the Route 6, academic option Route 6, where students are taking an A-level and 2 AAQs. And the 2 small AAQs. And the question is whether we have any information about what lower prior attainment means for those students who are able to take 2 AAQs. My understanding, it was potentially students on part-time study courses as well as other routes through. Is that right?
It's hard to get further information. That the update that was provided in the November guidance was purely that statement, students with lower prior attainment at level 2. There was no further detail in the consultation outcomes or the funding manual, but we do know that the DFE has had a number of requests for details. So what we've been advised is that in the next webinar update from the DFE, they're going to look to provide some further contextualization as to what that would include. So hopefully at some juncture we can provide further information on our fact sheets and our websites as to what that pertains to. But it is a good question. It's very vague and very brief in terms of an update, but it is hopeful that it will be accessible to more learners at level 2.
Okay, thanks, Chris. One about AQA applied generals, a topic very close to my heart. If we have a cohort which starts in September 2024, which is indeed the last year of teaching, and finishes in July 26, would the last year 13 be unfunded? I think the answer is that they would be funded through to summer 26, that being the last exam, and importantly the last cohort for first teaching will be September 24. So I think the answer is that they would be funded through to the end of the course, but if they were trying to start off that, they wouldn't, which is why we're withdrawing it when it is. So the funding should go with the removal dates from AQA. So hopefully that reassures you. Another couple about AAQs, if that's okay, Chris. if the small AAQ in sport doesn't come in until 2026, does that mean that the BTEC extended certificate in sport stays with us until then?
Correct.
Any idea? Is that right?
Yeah. So you'll not see the defunding of those SSA subjects until August 2026. So that will be in place for another year.
Right. Thank you. And another one about AAQs. Is the intention for health and social and IT, if it's to be a small AAQ 360 guided learning hours, or is there a chance that it could become a bigger one? We currently offer diplomas in both at 720 guided learning hours.
So we are restricted to that being a small AAQ only. Given that the larger AAQ, there would be a concern that they would have some level of overlap with the T levels. So unfortunately, they have restricted that to small AAQs only, to the maximum size of 360 GLH.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the clarification. So that guided learning hours and the size is really quite critical, isn't it, in terms of what's being offered at what phase, what cycle, and what that actually looks like for students in the combination of qualifications that they can take side by side. So quite a lot to digest there in terms of what's available when and what it looks like. Thank you. Another one just coming in. So okay, so any feel for whether any of this may change if party and government changes? Many of our colleagues are assuming BTECs will continue unchanged if Labour gets in. Do you want to go first, Chris, on that one?
Yeah, it's a question.
Personal views.
It's a question we get asked often, and it's always a risk. It is a risk, and I think if we look at the updates in the Advanced British Standard, that in itself is that 10-year vision, and within the updates they do confirm that reforms will continue as planned. So our view is that it's unlikely, but we do understand there's a level of risk to someday.
Absolutely, that's certainly the message that I'm picking up. There isn't a sort of clear communication that anything would change significantly in the timeline that's being indicated. So in response to another question about any indication that Labour would honour these changes, the likelihood is yes, I think we can say. Okay, that's all we've got at the moment. If anybody else has got another question, we've got a couple more minutes, I think.
Julian, there's just one more further down.
Have I missed one? Sorry.
About sharing the slide and so on. It's all right, sharing the slides and so on, so I can cover that one off. Yes, we'll be sharing the slides. The slides will come out automatically to those of you that are in the meeting. We'll also share them with colleagues that couldn't make the meeting today. We won't be repeating the webinar live, but the recording, this recording will be available on our YouTube SLT playlist, and we'll post a link to that again when we send out the FAQs. Although we've covered all the questions, there won't actually be any FAQs, but when we send follow-up from this, which will include Julian's questionnaire about the Advanced British Standard, we'll also include a link to the webinar at that point.
Thanks, Nick. I think one colleague has got a hand up. I don't know whether we can deal with that in any way other than it being put into the...
There's one more question just come in on the chat, on the Q&A.
Okay. Has anyone done any staffing modelling based on mainly A-level provision to ABS? It's a very, very good question, and one which I would be interested in your views. As I said through the survey, it's something that I think is a question that needs to be explored in quite a lot of detail and breadth over the coming year or so. The honest answer is I don't know whether any modelling has taken place yet. It's certainly a question that needs to be explored further. So really good question. Thank you.
There is somebody with a hand up. I'm going to unmute that person and ask them to ask their question, if that's okay. If I can work out how to unmute. There we go. Allow mic. The person with the hand up, you'll have to unmute yourself now. You can unmute yourself, but you'll have to do that yourself manually.
Hi there, thank you for doing that. My Q&A isn't working. I don't know if anyone else is having the same problem. My question is around how do we voice concerns around the lead times involved? Because obviously not knowing what the detail of what's going to run until the summer, when we're actually going to be offering it to students in the September, is too tight for us. And I would imagine for lots of other schools to do staffing planning, curriculum planning, agree it through the trust board and all those sorts of things. So how do we voice concerns about that?
Can I just check this is around the phasing of the AAQs, the introduction of the AAQs specifically, or?
Yes, well,
more
any
broadly?
change, any curriculum changes that you do needs enough lead
Yeah.
time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In terms of the ABS, then it'll be through the survey coming through. Chris, I guess in terms of the AAQs, through contacting you directly and getting that into the system that way?
Yeah, absolutely. With us just reiterating the point that the timeframes that I went through is that the approval of AAQs will be approved anywhere between May. So for example, for cycle 1, those will be approved May 2024 to September 2024 at the latest, given a full year's lead-in time for curriculum planning for first teaching.
Yes, but schools are promoting those so they already have to have had agreed what their offer is going to be. They go out in that early autumn term with their offer to their students in order for them to choose options, in order to do staffing planning and curriculum planning. So actually it's too short, too tight. It needs to be approved 6 months before that.
Yeah, and fully understand that, Rebecca. And I think as Julian mentioned, if you want to reach out to the email address that's in the slides or in the webinar and drop us an email on that, we can pick up that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And thanks, Nick, for, I was just going to say, can you put that back up? So the contact details are on screen now, which picks up nicely on the last question. So that you can do that follow up. And as Nick said, the slides will come out, as will a link to the recording. So I think it just ends for me to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And please do get in touch and please do respond to the survey that will come out next week, because we genuinely want to know what you feel about it and what your thoughts are in terms of the opportunities and threats of the next decade or so. So thank you all very much. And thanks, Chris, and thanks, Nick, for managing the process as well. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.